Okay, and we're back. So this video, this part of the video will be going over just the base and the internal components, so you can kind of familiarize yourself with what's there and see the order of operations as far as being able to take it apart and then putting it back together. Okay. So first and foremost, the thing that you'll need is, this is where your #1 Phillips screwdriver is going to come into play here, because you've got 2 Phillips screws. Okay. And again, no battery in it, right? Because the battery's in it, this whole thing is under spring tension, and it can kind of like come apart on you, and that's never a good thing, right? So, all right. Well, first thing we need to do is we need to remove this portion over here. And all you got to do to remove it, it's just a sleeve that goes around the outside of here, and you just kind of grab it and walk it back and forth, and it'll come loose. There you go. Okay. This is the easy one. There's one on the top, not so easy. In fact, sometimes it's downright difficult, right? So we got 2 #1 Phillips screws here. So we're going to go at those. Okay. 1. 2. Okay. So, one thing you'll note here is there's a seam along. Let me see if they can capture that in the plastic. No. Okay. Well, there's a seam here that holds the 2 halves together, right? So you want to make sure you're holding it together while you're unscrewing it, so it doesn't kind of come apart on you, right? But essentially, to open it up now, we're just going to lift the bottom away from the top, or lift the top away from the bottom rather. Okay. And you'll notice, right? So like this is the top with the hole in it, right? But the boards, some stayed on the top, some stayed on the bottom. Okay. So, and that's okay, because we can get everything back together again. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and take the top there. Okay. So this is essentially what the insides of the base look like. Okay. You have your battery connection board here. This is your processing board right here. Okay. And then this board here is the one that gets attached to the power and brings the power back down to this board here. And you'll have this small board here that has its own ribbon cable. Okay. This is the board that has your LED in it that shines from the base once the RFID is detected. And then in this gray portion here is where we have your little antenna there, your coil for the for reading the RFID. Okay. And then right here, this little board that sticks out on the side, this is that Hall effect sensor I was telling you about. So one of the things that can happen is this sensor on this board is pretty sensitive. Well, it's a sensor that's sensitive, I know. But you'll notice that it's at a 90-degree angle to the board. Okay. Sometimes it doesn't end up being at a 90-degree angle when they're manufactured. So, and that can kind of lead to weak signal. So one of the things that I've done to fix this myself in the past is straighten that board out. Straighten the board out, get it at exactly, or as closer to a 90-degree angle. Let me zoom in here real quick. There we go. So this is the Hall effect sensor right there. That's what that is. Okay. And it, if that board is not at a 90-degree angle, sometimes it'll be tilted one way or the other, where that Hall effect sensor will be too far away from the magnet to be able to read effectively. And then it'll have a problem noticing when the magnet is gone and therefore turn on, right? So it's kind of an important piece, right? And then you'll notice that there's a gap in the coil part, right? That gap is where the Hall effect sensor sits. That's how you know where to line that up. Okay. So that's pretty much what the base looks like there. Okay, these are those pogo pins I was telling you about here with the springs in them. See? So sometimes you can get it to where you know, that things aren't lining up correctly. At least on this half of the saber, you don't have to worry so much about any of your solder joints becoming work hardened and coming loose or anything like that. So really, if the base works, the base works. So, and another thing to note on this as well is that all the boards kind of fit into a channel, right? See how they all fit into a channel, except for this power board. The power board fits into a channel, but the channel is on the other half. So that's super convenient, right? So it makes it a little bit of a challenge to line back up, but it can be done, right? So that's pretty much what the internals look like. Okay, so right today we don't need to troubleshoot this part here. I think I'm gonna focus usually where the problem is the ribbon cable and then the top half of the hilt as well. So we'll be focusing on that a little bit. So I'll go ahead and just kind of tie this guy back up here, get everything back lined up the way it's supposed to be. And a little tip to get the power board lined back up with the lined back up with the slots on this side is to put them together by just tilting it into each other. It seems to help make it much. There we go. Okay, and when you've got things lined up right, it should just go back together, right? So you'll notice here, so it didn't go back together, but then all of a sudden it did because something was not lined up, and now it is. If you can't get it to where there's no seams, that means something is definitely lined up wrong. One of the things about Disney and the way that they make their products, let me zoom back out. The way that they make their products is they make things so they can be manufactured very, very simply. And one of the things that they do in that is to eliminate the possibility of errors. They make it to where things just will not fit back together again unless they're back together again. You know, so you'll have a piece of plastic with a seam in it or a gap, right? And if that is an indicator that something is not lined up right, it's an indicator that something just has gone wrong with the assembly process. So, you know, it's a very good thing because it makes them much easier to fix. So, all right, we'll go ahead and put the screws back in. Okay, again, my rule is I back out before I go in. I thought I felt a click, but then I felt resistance, so it was not the click. I back out so I don't, you know, tap new screw threads into the plastic on the bottom. This plastic is very chewy and soft, so we don't want to tap new threads if we can help it at all. Okay, and then we put the nut back on. You'll notice here it can't go on wrong. Again, Disney cannot go on wrong, so there's only one way it can go on, and we're good. Okay, so the bottom half is basically reassembled. So we'll be back in just a minute, and we'll go over the middle part. Okay, get ready for some little more finesse move here, or, you know, finesse work here, because it's a little more sensitive and things are get more fragile as you go up the blade. Be right back.